Mr. God excitedly ran downstairs. He just heard the front door close. Mrs. God had returned home from a week-long yoga retreat. "Hi, honey," said Mrs. God. She gave him a hug and a kiss. "You seem very excited with yourself." "Wait till you see what I've been up to," said Mr. God. Mr. God took Mrs. God's hand and walked her down to the third dimension. "Close your eyes now. No peeking." Mrs. God chuckled. She loved it when Mr. God had made her a surprise. "You can open them now," said Mr. God. "Ta-da!" "Wow," said Mrs. God. She moved her hands from her eyes. "This is stunning." "Let me show you around," said Mr. God. "First, I created light, and I was amazed at how much room there was down here. So I started filling the space with billions of galaxies, solar systems, constellations, suns, moons, black holes, asteroids, comets, and meteors. Then I sprinkled trillions and trillions of stars everywhere." "I can see," said Mrs. God, as she gave Mr. God a cuddle. "This is one of the most incredible creations you've ever made. It's breathtaking, the sheer size and complexity of it all." "That's not the best bit," said Mr. God. "Wait till I show you what I made over in this corner." Mr. God took Mrs. God over to a far, far corner of the universe. "Look at this," said Mr. God. "Oh, babe, that's stunning," said Mrs. God. "It looks like a shining blue sapphire with wisps of pearl that constantly swirl and change, creating ever new patterns." "Look closer," said Mr. God with a grin. "Oh," said Mrs. God, excitedly clapping her hands. "You've put life on it." "Yes," said Mr. God. "I wanted to create something extra special. When I started, I couldn't stop. I created thousands of different animals of all shapes, sizes, and colors that swim, fly, bounce, jump, run, slither, and crawl. I had so much fun. Look, this is one of my favorites. I've called it a bee." Mrs. God giggled. "Oh, it's divine, and such a funny little thing. It's gorgeous." "What's that beautiful sound?" said Mrs. God. "Oh, that's the birds," said Mr. God. "They're so happy, they've never stopped singing since I gave them wings. And look, I created a sun that brings light, water that brings life, and a moon that keeps everything in balance. Nothing is wasted, and all things live in harmony with one another. I then turned all the land into a huge garden. I scattered trees, flowers, grass, fungi, and herbs everywhere that provide shelter, food, colour, scent, and even help heal. Watch. If I plant a seed, pop, it grows food." "That's like magic," said Mrs. God. "I've never witnessed anything like it. So there truly is heaven in the earth." "Hey, that's a great name," said Mr. God. "I hadn't thought of one. Let's call the planet Mother Earth." Mrs. God was delighted with the idea and gave Mr. God an extra big hug. "And finally," said Mr. God with a big smile, "and I think you'll love this, I created these. Look, one that looks just like you and one that looks just like me. And of all the creations, I bestowed upon them consciousness so they can farm the land, take care of the animals and plants, walk, run, dance, laugh and sing. They can live a life of abundance where food is everywhere, marvel at the beauty around them, and live in a blissful space of love, joy and harmony, and bear witness to the wonder of life and the universe forever. When Earth spins, they have daylight to be amazed by all the living things I created for them, and at night they can stare up at the sky and marvel at the heavenly bodies and the majesty of space. They've called themselves human beings." "Wow, you've thought of everything," said Mrs. God. "The planets, animals, birds, flowers, water, stars, and human beings to look after and care for it and live in a world of joy. This truly is the greatest creation you've ever made." "Thank you," said Mr. God, giving Mrs. God a kiss. "I hoped you'd like it." "Like it?" said Mrs. God. "I've never seen anything as incredible. I'm breathless with its sheer beauty." Mrs. God continued to look around at all the wonders on Earth, amazed at the diversity and complexity of what Mr. God had created. After a little while, she turned to Mr. God and asked, "So, what have these human beings achieved with the consciousness you gave them?" Well, that's the odd thing, said Mr. God. At first they built incredible structures, took what they needed, nothing more, nothing less, lived their lives in tranquility, and were reverent to the balance and the sheer beauty of life and the universe as I had wished. And now, said Mrs. God, well, now they seem to have settled to work for 60 years, buy stuff, pay taxes, and drop dead, said Mr. God. Jesus, said Mrs. God.